You're standing in your living room right now, staring at that TV you bought 3 years ago, and something feels off. The blacks aren't really black anymore. They're more like dark gray. Bright scenes look washed out during the day, and you keep turning up the brightness just to see what's happening in dark movie scenes. You've convinced yourself it's fine, but deep down, you know you're missing something. Here's what nobody tells you when you walk into that store. The type of display technology in your TV matters more than the size, more than the brand name, and definitely more than whatever buzzword they're using this year. We're talking about the actual science of how light hits your eyeballs, and whether you're seeing what the director intended or some watered-down version that makes everything look like a soap opera filmed through a dirty window. Today, we're ranking 4 major display technologies from absolute worst to surprisingly best. LED, QLED, Mini LED, and OLED. And I'm warning you right now, the number 1 spot is going to make you question everything you thought you knew about picture quality. But here's the thing that's going to save you thousands of dollars. Understanding why one technology costs 3 times more than another, and whether that premium is actually worth it for the way you watch TV. Because, spoiler alert, the most expensive option isn't always the best choice for your living room. Starting at the bottom, we have standard LED. And honestly, calling this the worst feels almost unfair, because for 15 years, this was all we had. Remember when flat screens first came out and we all thought they were magical? That was LED technology. Here's how it works, and I promise to keep this simple. You've got a panel of liquid crystals, basically tiny shutters that open and close. Behind that panel, there's a strip of LED lights running along the edges, usually the top and bottom. Those lights blast forward, and the liquid crystals either block the light or let it through to create the image you see. Sounds reasonable, right? The problem is physics. When you're trying to show a dark scene, like a spaceship floating in the blackness of space, those edge lights are still on. They have to be, because they're lighting the entire screen. So the liquid crystals are doing their best to block light and create black, but they can't block it completely. What you end up seeing is dark gray instead of true black. It's like trying to create darkness in a room by closing curtains, while someone's shining a flashlight behind them. I had a neighbor who bought a budget LED TV last year, one of those Black Friday deals that seemed too good to pass up. 55 inches for $399. He was thrilled until he tried watching The Batman. Every dark scene looked muddy, details disappeared into gray mush, and he spent half the movie adjusting settings, trying to figure out what was wrong. Nothing was wrong with his TV. That's just what LED does. It's not broken. It's limited by the fundamental design. The other issue nobody mentions is something called backlight bleed. Since those edge lights are always on and always pushing light toward you, it leaks around the edges, especially in dark rooms. You'll notice it most when the screen is supposed to be completely black, like during movie credits. Instead of pure black, you see this glow around the borders, sometimes worse in the corners. Once you notice it, you can't unsee it. But here's where it gets interesting. LED isn't terrible for everything. If you're watching daytime television, news, sports, or bright, colorful content, LED handles it fine. The problems only become obvious in high-contrast scenarios. Dark rooms, cinematic content, anything that demands deep blacks and subtle shadow detail. For someone who mainly watches morning shows and game shows in a bright living room, LED might actually be perfectly adequate. The picture is clear, colors are decent, and you're not paying for capabilities you'll never use. Now let's talk about QLED, And this is where Samsung enters the chat with their marketing department working overtime. QLED stands for Quantum Dot LED, which sounds like something from a sci-fi movie, but is actually a clever improvement on standard LED technology. Here's the upgrade. Between the LED backlight and the liquid crystal layer, Samsung added a film containing billions of tiny nanocrystals called quantum dots. When light from the LED backlight hits these quantum dots, they emit extremely pure colors. Red quantum dots emit perfect red light. Blue quantum dots emit perfect blue, and so on. The result is significantly better color than standard LED. We're talking about richer, more saturated colors that actually look like what you'd see in real life. A sunset doesn't just look orange. It looks like that specific shade of orange that makes you stop and stare. Grass looks genuinely green instead of that weird yellow-green tint older TVs produced. For bright, colorful content, QLED genuinely impresses. Sports look phenomenal. Animated movies pop off the screen, and HDR content has that wow factor that makes your friends ask what kind of TV you bought. But, and this is crucial, QLED still uses the same edge-lit LED backlight system as standard LED, which means the black level problem hasn't changed. Quantum dots make colors better, but they don't help with contrast or black levels at all. You're still getting dark gray instead of true black. It's like upgrading from a regular pizza to a gourmet pizza, but you're still eating it on a paper plate. Better ingredients, same fundamental limitations. I sold a customer a Samsung QLED last year, the QN series, and he loved it for about 2 months. Then he watched Blade Runner 2049 in his home theater setup with blackout curtains. He called me the next day asking if something was wrong because the dark scenes looked washed out and gray. Nothing was wrong. He just discovered the limitation of edge-lit backlighting in a dark room environment. We ended up exchanging it for something better, which we'll get to in a minute. The other thing about QLED that Samsung won't emphasize is brightness. These panels can get extremely bright, sometimes hitting 2000 nits or more. For a sunny living room, that's fantastic. But in a dark room, that aggressive brightness combined with mediocre black levels creates a weird imbalance. Bright elements look nuclear, dark elements look gray, and your eyes are constantly adjusting between the two extremes. It's fatiguing in a way that's hard to explain until you experience it. But credit where it's due, QLED represents real innovation. Samsung took LED technology and meaningfully improved one of its biggest weaknesses, color reproduction. For people who watch TV primarily during the day, who love vibrant, punchy images, and who aren't pixel-peeping dark scenes, QLED delivers legitimate value. It's not perfect, but it's a substantial upgrade over standard LED without requiring you to take out a second mortgage. Here's where things get exciting. Mini LED is what happens when engineers looked at the fundamental problem with LED and QLED, the edge-lit backlight, and decided to completely redesign it. Instead of a strip of large LEDs along the edges, Mini LED uses thousands of tiny LEDs spread across the entire back of the panel. We're talking about LEDs the size of a grain of rice, arranged in zones that can individually turn on and off. This changes everything. Remember how edge-lit panels struggle with dark scenes because the backlight is always on? Mini LED solves this by dividing the screen into hundreds or even thousands of zones. When a part of the image should be dark, the LEDs in that zone turn off completely or dim way down. When a part should be bright, those specific LEDs crank up. It's called local dimming, and when done right, it's transformative. I tested a TCL Mini LED set last month, the QM series, and showed it to someone who'd never heard of Mini LED technology. We pulled up a scene from Dune, The one where Paul walks into the dark chamber with a single shaft of light cutting through. On a standard LED, that scene looks flat. The darkness isn't dark enough, and the bright shaft of light bleeds into surrounding areas. On this mini LED panel, the darkness was actually dark, nearly OLED levels of black, and that single beam of light was brilliant and precise without any glow or halo around it. My friend literally said, "I didn't know TVs could do that." The black levels on a good mini LED panel approach OLED quality in most content. Not quite perfect, you can still see some very subtle blooming if you're specifically looking for it, but it's close enough that 95% of viewers won't notice or care. And here's the kicker. Mini LED maintains all the brightness advantages of QLED while adding genuine contrast. You can watch in a bright room during the day and enjoy stunning HDR highlights, then watch a dark movie at night and get blacks that actually look black. But Mini LED has a quirk that manufacturers don't advertise, something called the halo effect. Because the dimming zones, while numerous, are still zones and not individual pixels, you can sometimes see a faint glow around bright objects against dark backgrounds. Picture white text on a black screen, like movie subtitles. On a lesser Mini LED implementation, you might see a subtle halo of light around each letter. The more dimming zones a TV has, the less noticeable this becomes, but it's still technically there. I watched a customer return a budget Mini LED TV specifically because of this issue. He was watching a lot of foreign films with subtitles, and the haloing drove him crazy once he noticed it. But when I showed him a premium Mini LED model with over 1,000 dimming zones, the effect was so minimal he had to squint and actively look for it. Quality matters enormously with Mini LED, more so than with other technologies. The other consideration is that Mini LED panels are thicker than standard LED or QLED. All those tiny LEDs and the local dimming hardware add depth. So if you're planning to wall mount and want that ultra slim profile, Mini LED might not be your aesthetic choice. It's still reasonably thin, but you're not getting that jaw-droppingly sleek profile that some premium panels offer. For value-conscious buyers who want near flagship performance, Mini LED is the sweet spot right now. Brands like TCL and Hisense are putting Mini LED technology in sets that cost half what Samsung and LG charge for their premium options, and the performance gap is shockingly narrow. You're getting genuine HDR, excellent brightness, very good black levels, and impressive color, all for a price that won't make your accountant weep. And now, the technology that changed everything and continues to dominate the high-end market, OLED. This is where we need to understand a fundamental difference. LED, QLED, and Mini LED all work by shining light through liquid crystals. OLED doesn't do that at all. Each pixel in an OLED panel is its own tiny, organic, light-emitting diode. When a pixel needs to be red, it glows red. When it needs to be black, it turns completely off. No backlight, no liquid crystals, no compromises. This creates perfect blacks. Not almost perfect, not pretty good. Actually perfect. When an OLED pixel is off, it emits zero light, the same amount of light as if the TV wasn't even there. The impact of this is hard to overstate. Watching a dark movie scene on OLED is like looking through a window into a dark room rather than looking at a screen. Details that disappear into gray mush on other technologies remain visible on OLED because the surrounding darkness is truly dark, creating contrast that makes subtle details pop. I had a film editor friend come over to watch The Northman on my OLED. He paused during a nighttime scene and just stared for probably 30 seconds before saying, "This is the first time I've seen this at home the way we color graded it in the studio." That's the OLED difference. You're not seeing an interpretation of the image. You're seeing the actual image as it was intended. The color on OLED is also exceptional, because each pixel produces its own light and color independently. There's no color filter or quantum dot layer affecting things. When an OLED pixel needs to be crimson red, it just is, perfectly and precisely. Skin tones look natural, sunsets look authentic, and nothing ever feels oversaturated or artificially punched up unless that's how it was mastered. Viewing angles on OLED are perfect from anywhere in the room. With LED-based technologies, if you sit too far to the side, colors shift and contrast degrades. OLED looks identical whether you're sitting dead center or way off to the side. For a living room where people sit in various spots, this matters more than you might think. But we need to talk about the concerns because OLED isn't perfect, and the internet has convinced people to either worship or fear it, with very little middle ground. The biggest worry is burn-in, where a static image displayed for hundreds of hours can leave a permanent ghost on the screen. This was a real problem on early OLED panels. Modern OLEDs have implemented numerous protections like pixel shifting, automatic brightness limiting on static elements, and screen refresh cycles, and burn-in has become exceptionally rare for normal viewing habits. However, if you plan to use your TV as a computer monitor displaying the same desktop icons 8 hours a day, or if you watch one news channel with a permanent logo in the corner for 6 hours daily, burn-in risk becomes real. For normal TV and movie watching, gaming with varied content, streaming shows, you're almost certainly fine. LG's recent OLEDs have been in the market for years now, and widespread burn-in simply hasn't materialized the way early critics predicted. The other consideration is brightness. OLED panels can't match the peak brightness of high-end QLED or mini-LED displays. The latest OLED technology has improved dramatically, hitting 1200 to 1500 nits in highlights, but a premium mini-LED can hit 3000 nits. In a dark or moderately lit room, OLED brightness is more than adequate. In an extremely bright room with lots of windows and sunlight, OLED might look dimmer than you'd prefer during daytime viewing. I helped a customer choose between an LG OLED and a Samsung Mini LED, and the deciding factor was his living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows facing south, sunlight streaming in all afternoon. The OLED would have struggled in that environment. We went with Mini LED, and he's been happy. But his home theater room downstairs, blackout curtains, controlled lighting, I recommended OLED without hesitation. The price of OLED has also dropped significantly. A few years ago, you needed $3,000 minimum for a decent-sized OLED. Today, you can find excellent OLED panels in the $1,200 to $1,800 range, sometimes less during sales. Still more expensive than budget options, but the gap has narrowed to the point where it's a reasonable consideration for anyone serious about picture quality. So, what's the verdict? Which technology actually wins? For pure picture quality in an ideal environment, OLED takes the crown, and it's not particularly close. The perfect blacks, flawless contrast, accurate colors, and immersive viewing experience make it the gold standard for home theater enthusiasts and anyone who watches a lot of cinematic content. If you care deeply about seeing movies and shows exactly as they were meant to be seen, OLED is the answer. But the best technology for you depends on your specific situation. If you have a bright living room and watch mostly daytime television, Mini LED offers better practical performance than OLED in that environment. If you're on a budget but still want surprisingly good picture quality, a decent Mini LED panel from TCL or Hisense delivers incredible value. If you want maximum brightness and the punchiest possible image for sports and vibrant content, high-end QLED might be your preference. The real shock isn't just that OLED is number one. It's that the gap between the technologies has narrowed so much that choosing the right one for your needs matters more than choosing the theoretically best one. Mini LED has evolved to the point where it can genuinely challenge OLED in many scenarios while costing significantly less. That's the actual story of 2026 display technology. Not that one technology dominates everything, but that multiple technologies have reached a level where they each excel in specific situations. If I'm making a recommendation for most people, here it is. For movie lovers with controlled lighting, OLED every time. For bright room viewing and maximum versatility, premium mini LED from TCL, Hisense, or Sony. For budget-conscious buyers who still want good performance, mid-range mini LED. And standard LED or entry-level QLED only if you're extremely price-sensitive and mainly watching non-demanding content. The display technology in your TV will affect your viewing experience every single day for years. It's worth understanding what you're actually buying instead of just picking the biggest screen with the lowest price tag. Because the difference between watching a movie on standard LED versus OLED isn't subtle. It's the difference between seeing a picture of the ocean and actually standing at the beach. Both show you water, but only one makes you feel something.